Certainly to cover up that they were the ones releasing it.
Director Rogers, in an effort to explain why there was no evidence supporting the president's claim that Obama had wiretapped him, the president and his spokesman, Sean Spicer, have suggested that British intelligence, through its NSA or GCHQ, wiretapped Mr. Trump on President Obama's behalf. Did you ever request that your counterparts in GCHQ should wiretap Mr. Trump on behalf of President Obama?
No, sir, nor would I. That would be expressly against the construct of the Five Eyes agreement that's been in place for decades.
And the Five Eyes are some of our closest intelligence partners, and Britain is one of them.
Yes, sir.
Have you seen any evidence that anyone else in the Obama administration made such a request?
No, sir, and again, my view is the same as Director Comey. I've seen nothing on the NSA side that we engaged in any such activity, nor that anyone ever asked us to engage in such activity.
And if you were to ask the British to spy on America, that would be a violation of U.S. law, would it not?
Yes, sir.
Our relationship with British intelligence is one of the closest we have with any foreign services. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, our British allies have called the president's suggestion that they wiretapped him for Obama nonsense and utterly ridiculous. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
Does it do damage to our relationship with one of our closest intelligence partners for the president to make a baseless claim that the British participated in a conspiracy against him?
I think it clearly frustrates a key ally of ours.
Certainly wouldn't endear the British intelligence services to continue working with us, would it?
I believe that the relationship is strong enough. This is something we'll be able to deal with.
But it's not helpful.
Yes,
you would
sir.
agree. Director Rogers, President Trump recently met with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. During a joint press conference, the president suggested that they both had something in common, that they had both been wiretapped by President Obama. Director Comey has just demonstrated why the claims by the president about his being wiretapped by Obama were unsupported by any evidence. But the claim he made about wiretapping directed at Merkel referred to something that came up in the context of the Snowden disclosures. I'm not going to ask you to comment on whether the chancellor was the subject of any eavesdropping, but I would like to ask you whether the Snowden disclosures did damage to our relationship with our German ally, and whether the chancellor herself expressed her concern at the time.
Yes, sir.
In light of this, is it helpful to our relationship with the chancellor or our relationship with German intelligence to bring this up again in a public forum?
It certainly complicates things, but again, I'd like to think that our relationship is such we're going to be able to deal and keep moving forward.
So our relationships with the British and the Germans, you hope, are strong enough to withstand any damage done by these comments?
By anything in general, sir. We have foundational interests with each other. We need to keep working together.
This time, Director Comey, let me ask you a few questions you may or may not be able to answer. Do you know who Roger Stone is?
Generally, yes.
Are you aware that he was a partner of Paul Manafort?
You know, Mr. Schiff, I'm worried we're going to a place I don't want to go, which is commenting on any particular person. And so I don't think I should comment. I'm aware of public accounts, but I don't want to talk more than that.
Are you aware that he has publicly acknowledged having directly communicated with Guccifer II, someone that the intelligence community has assessed was a persona of Russian intelligence?
I've read media accounts to that effect. I don't want to hurt anybody's feeling in the media. I don't know whether that's accurate or not.
If Mr. Stone acknowledged that Mr. Podesta's time in the barrel was coming in August of 2016, would that have been prior to the public release of stolen emails of Mr. Podesta's?
I believe that's correct chronology.
Do you know how Mr. Stone would have known that Mr. Podesta's emails were going to be released?
It's not something I can comment on.
Do you know that Mr. Podesta has said that at the time he was not even aware of whether his emails had been stolen and would be published?
It's not something I can comment on. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield to
Mr. Himes.
Thank you to the ranking member, and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. Let me, when I get my own time, I'll have some follow-up questions, but let me start with a point that the chairman brought out, I think, very specifically, which is that there's no evidence that votes were technically changed in any of the jurisdictions that he named. Admiral Rogers, thanks for confirming that. But am I correct that when we say Russian hacking, what we are referring to is the fact that the intelligence community believes that the Russians penetrated the networks of the DNC, of John Podesta and other individuals, stole information, and then disseminated that information? Is that a fair characterization of the conclusions of the intelligence community?
Yes, sir.
And did the intelligence community ever do an analysis as to whether the dissemination of that adverse information in a closely fought election had any effect on the American electorate?
No, sir. The U.S. intelligence community does not do assessments of
course not.
policy or U.S. opinion.
That's not your job.
Yes, sir.
In fact, as those of us who go through campaigns know, that's actually something we probably have a little bit more understanding of. Let me just ask this question then. Was there any equivalent dissemination of adverse information stolen from the RNC or individuals associated with the Trump campaign?
No.
Thank you. Director Comey, in the remaining minutes here, I appreciate your frankness on the topic of an ongoing investigation and appreciate your inability to go too much further than you went. But I do want to ask you a question to try to clear up some confusion. This committee, of course, is engaged in an investigation about links, as you said, between the Trump campaign and the Russians, should there be any possible collusion. We've had a number of statements very early in the investigation that there was no evidence of collusion. This is still very early in our investigation. Is it fair to say that you're still relatively early in your investigation?
It's hard to say because I don't know how much longer it will take, but we've been doing this. This investigation began in late July, so for a counterintelligence investigation, that's a fairly short period of time.
So you use the word coordination, which to me suggests that you are in fact investigating whether there was coordination between U.S. persons and the Russians. Is it fair for me to assume that we shouldn't simply dismiss the possibility that there was coordination or collusion between the Russian efforts and U.S. persons as an investigatory body?
All I can tell you is what we're investigating, which includes whether there was any coordination between people associated with the Trump campaign and the Russians.
Okay, thank you. I'll yield the remaining time to the ranking member.
I will yield the remaining time in this period to Representative Sewell.
Thank you. So, with respect to the coordination, Director Comey, I just wanted to continue this line of questioning. Can you say with any specificity what kind of coordination or contacts you're looking at in your investigation generally when confronted with something like this?
I can't.
Can you discuss whether or not there was any knowledge by any Trump-related person and the Russians?
I can't.
So, with respect to any investigation, ongoing investigation, whether the specificity of the person, U.S. person or otherwise, you can't comment on any of that?
Correct.
Okay. Can you characterize what the nature of your investigation generally, when you do an investigation of this sort, can you talk a little bit about the process generally?
Not a whole lot. I can tell you we use our great people. We coordinate with our brothers and sisters in other parts of the intelligence community to see what they may know from around the world that might be useful to us.